throughout next week, the Parliament of Sri Lanka will be debating the agreement which the government has reached with the International Monetary Fund. This was an agreement which was reached not smoothly, not easily, but the price of it was subjection to highly onerous and oppressive conditions. Sri Lanka has to alienate institutions and enterprises which we have built up with tremendous energy and perseverance. The alienation of some of these institutions entails not only financial but also security implications. Take for example Sri Lanka Telecom, undersea cables, sensitive information which has been gathered. Now all of this is going to be sold to foreign companies. Then there is the insurance corporation, under it Litrogas, Lanka Hospitals and so on. All of this has to be alienated. Cynically contrary to solemn assurances which we gave the people of Sri Lanka during the presidential election of November 2019 and the parliamentary election of August 2020. We have forgotten all of that. We have gone back on every word that we said to the people of our country. Then, water, electricity, which are essentials of day-to-day living, are now beyond the reach of the poorer sections of our people. 90,000 consumers have already had their water disconnected, and electricity consumption has gone down by a little more than 20%. But the most serious consequences arise in the field of the local debt being visited under this whole program, the restructuring of the domestic component of the debt. Now this involves money belonging to workers in this country, the Employees Provident Fund, the Employees Trust Fund. This is money belonging to workers. This is the money on which they were hoping to live after retirement. Now the value of that money is to fall drastically. There will also be horrendous implications with regard to the stability of the domestic banking system, in particular the National Savings Bank and the People's Bank. And since the Bank of Ceylon is larger, it can withstand these shocks for a little longer. But the Bank of Ceylon is also certainly vulnerable. So all these conditions we had to agree to as a price of arriving at this agreement with the International Monetary Fund. I don't think it's anything to celebrate by lighting firecrackers and eating kiribat. Now, there are other ways of obtaining for our country much needed foreign exchange, a far greater volume than we are receiving from the International Monetary Fund. The Express Pearl disaster, which occurred in the territorial waters of Sri Lanka approximately 2 years ago. The ship was burning for several days and it sank in the Sea of Ceylon, as it is called, discharging into our waters toxic chemicals, including nitric acid, a large volume of oil, totally destroying our marine life, our ecosystems, our coral reefs, our biodiversity. This is the most serious ecological disaster which happened to us at any time. It's not only to Sri Lanka, but even on a global scale, it is one of the most serious ecological disasters. Tourism completely destroyed the livelihoods of our fishing communities. So there was an incalculable impact on the economy, on our environment, and the health and well-being of our people. Now, we are in a position to claim approximately $6.4 billion US from the owners and the insurance company that insured this vessel. That amount is more than twice what we are getting from the International Monetary Fund. And mind you, the 6.4 billion is not a loan. Loan means you have to pay capital and interest. Here you don't have to pay anybody. It belongs to Sri Lanka. Total ownership is with Sri Lanka. There are no strings attached, no conditions. There is no need to impose this degree of anguish and hardship on our people. It is ours to claim. It belongs to us. Other countries have done that, including the United States of America, Egypt. They have bestirred themselves, claimed compensation in the appropriate fora through proper procedures. And they have got the compensation to which they were entitled. Nothing of the sort has happened in Sri Lanka. As I said, this happened almost 2 years ago. Absolutely nothing has happened. Today we see in the media an announcement by the Attorney General of Sri Lanka that he proposes today, to file action in Singapore. Why this long slumber? 2 years, we have only about 600 hours left. 600 hours left. It is literally at the 11th hour that people are waking up from their slumber and instituting proceedings in Singapore. Is that the best course of action for our country? It may be the best course of action for some individuals, but is it the most beneficial course of action for Sri Lanka? The courts of Sri Lanka have complete jurisdiction in respect to this matter. There is no need to sink some more millions of dollars into proceedings in Singapore. This calamity occurred not on the high seas, but within the territorial waters of this country. So why was it not considered to institute this proceeding in Sri Lanka? Were there compelling reasons, cogent considerations? We need to know who made this decision, who endorsed it. All of this needs to be gone through with a fine tooth comb. Now, as usual in our country, all of this is put down to indifference and negligence. Unless one gets a personal benefit, one does not take too much interest in these matters. So it was attributed to lethargy, indifference. Now it turns out that it was nothing of the sort. It was not indifference or lethargy. It is fraud, pillage and plunder on a colossal scale. What is the source from which this heinous allegation emanates? It comes from no less than the minister, the Honorable Minister of Justice, Constitutional Affairs and Prison Reforms of this country, the Honorable Dr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa, President's Counsel, no less. Now he is telling us, he is telling the world that these proceedings, that this litigation which would have brought in its wake a sum of money far, far in excess, twice as much as we are getting from the IMF, he is now telling us that the litigation which would have made it possible for us to obtain this enormous quantity of resources has been deliberately suppressed by somebody in an exalted position who was paid a bribe of $250 million US, which was paid, according to him, according to Vijaydas Rajapaksa, into a British bank account. Dr. Rajapaksa has quoted chapter and verse. He has made the account numbers and all other relevant particulars available to the CID. Now, this is something that could not happen anywhere else in the world. It is absolutely unique to the situation in Sri Lanka and provides us with some indication of the scale of corruption. Everybody knows that corruption is endemic here. In fact, the International Monetary Fund has specifically referred to, in their words, corruption vulnerabilities. But the scale of it is staggering and takes even us by surprise. Now, many people are asking the question, well, what is the alternative? IMF, who else is there? How else can we get this money? Okay, go to the IMF, but conduct the negotiations in a way that puts the proper focus on the local requirements and nuances of the Sri Lankan situation. But now here is a very simple answer to that question. There are other alternative avenues for obtaining much valued foreign exchange. The express pearl, compensation. But it is not being done. Because of insatiable greed, even in the dire circumstances in which we find ourselves, that appetite has not been satiated. So that is the root of our problems. And I say in all humility that in my view, the International Monetary Fund is not paying sufficient attention to the incidence of corruption in this country. They must ensure, they are bound to do so, it is their duty. They must ensure that the assistance that they are providing will be utilized for the benefit, the well-being of our people. It will not be used to line the pockets of powerful politicians. They have a responsibility for ensuring that, because we have to pay this money back. Subsequent governments and the people of Sri Lanka have to pay this money back, and it is for them to ensure that the money which they are providing are utilized in a proper manner. We are not satisfied, frankly, that that is happening to the extent that it ought to happen. Then there is another matter which I would like to draw attention, that is, there are other ways in which the autocratic and irresponsible conduct of this government is depriving us of other concessions and privileges which have a monetary value far in excess of what we are receiving from the International Monetary Fund. Amidst all our economic difficulties, the one silver lining is our export income. The major markets for our export products are situated in Western Europe. Our tea, our garments, our fisheries products, our gems and jewelry, our leather products, our spices, all these things find their way into the markets of Western Europe, where we enjoy a very significant concession. That is the GSP plus concession, the effect of which is an exemption from customs levies, import taxes. It is not a reduction but a complete exemption. So that is an incomparable competitive advantage. Now we are in danger, not the danger of the virtual certainty of losing that. Because GSP Plus is neither an entitlement nor something that we are entitled to enjoy in perpetuity. It is not a right. It is only conditionally available to us. What is the condition? Compliance with 27 international covenants, the principal covenant being the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The ICCPR contains several very crucial provisions. For example, Article 5, which deals with the liberty of the person. Article 9, which deals with freedom of expression. Article 21, which deals with the right of assembly, the freedom of association. Article 25B, which deals with the franchise, the right of the people to elect their representatives at regular elections, which are freely and fairly held. And Article 26, which speaks of the rule of law, access to the courts, and so on. All these are totally, demonstrably contravened by the policies of the current government, the provisions of the antitrust bill, which the Justice Minister insists on presenting to Parliament, notwithstanding universal opposition from this country, from abroad, from religious leaders, from international organizations. He does not care. So there is that. Then there is the adamant refusal to hold elections, no provincial council elections for 4.5 years. 339 local bodies, no elections. Then rule of law. What rule of law is there to speak of when judges of the Supreme Court are being hauled up before a privileges committee of Parliament and being told what cases they can hear, what cases they cannot hear? And they are humiliated to the extent of having to explain their judicial conduct to a parliamentary committee. So Parliament overrides and controls the courts, even to the extent of deciding what cases Parliament will allow the courts to hear, what remains of the rule of law. So the net result of all this is that GSP Plus will not be available to us much longer. In fact, the European Union has made that abundantly clear. So that is going to result in the forfeiture of an advantage which in monetary terms is of far greater value to us than the money that we are getting from the International Monetary Fund.